Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here. So today I have two Void builds for you. Now, and y'all might be like, well, what about, some extra gameplay of the build and whatnot? Hold your horses. This build is going to be a little bit more on the friendly side in terms of what you need for it, but also it's going to be a little bit more complex. There's a little bit more nuances to both of these builds. Um, of course, we're going to start with the old build, and then we're going to go into the new build. For the old build, we're going to do a Fire Team Strike with two other random Guardians, and then the other one, we're going to be doing a solo Lost Sector. Keep in mind, both of these builds are capable of soloing strikes and that sort of thing. So, but those two things are going to be the best showcase of these abilities. Fun fact about this particular setup, this used to be a very similar build to my old GM setup. Um, but there is a few things to note here and there, because the super we are using is Bubble. Bubble did get changed recently, so I'll explain how this build used to work, and how it works now. Now, let's go ahead and get into it here. So, let's get into the subclass stuff first, because the weapons I will be because this is more of a friendlier build. I will be discussing alternate options to some of the weapons. Of course, not our main feature weapon, basically the kinetic slot, because I have heard the discourse of anti-barrier champions, that sort of thing. So that is something that I will be discussing with this build in particular. Because keep in mind, we no longer can stun anti-barriers with abilities necessarily. So and this build is more of a long-range build, a build that's a little bit more on the safer side. This build is meant to play from a safe distance. But of course, we're using Bubble as our super. Then we are using Rally Barricade. That is important because Rally Barricade gives bonus range, stability, and reload speed. It is basically a mini Lunafaction's boots. And then of course we're using Shield Throw. You can use Shield Bash, though it doesn't matter which melee you want, whatever melee you want to use. It's up to you. We're using a Magnetic Grenade. That is important. You do need to use Magnetic Grenade unless you are more comfortable with the different grenade, but the grenade that you are using has to be able to kill an enemy. It has to. For outside of that, we were using Bastion and Offensive Bulwark. Of course, Bastion got buffed to have 3 fragment slots. It used to only have 2. But casting your super grants an overshield to nearby allies. That part's not important. But the casting your barricade grants an overshield to yourself and nearby allies. That part is a part that's kind of important, because we are playing as a support for the most part. Then, of course, Offensive Bulwark, while you're inside, while you have an Overshield or inside a Ward of Dawn, Final Blows grant Grenade and Melee Energy. You have increased melee range and damage, and Melee Final Blows restore a small portion of your Overshield. And you gain an additional Shield Throw while in Sentinel Shield. That second part is not important because we are not using Sentinel Shield as our super. Other than that, our fragments here, we only have this. The crouch doesn't really matter. The main thing here is plus 10 weapon, plus 10 super. If you're using a build that has 5 fragment slots, for Void specifically, you should be using this. And then, of course, we have on Echo of Provision, gives plus 10 grenade, but dealing damage, damaging targets with grenades grants melee energy. Then Echo Instability is necessary. Defeating targets with grenades grants volatile rounds to your Void weapons. Then we have the reverse of Echo of Provision, being Echo of Exchange, so melee final blows grant grenade energy. And then our last one, Echo of Obscurity, because you need your class to be at around 70. You need it to be around 70, so that plus 10 is quite nice. And Finisher Final Blows grant invisibility. This is a lot more useful in higher end content. It's not as useful in like low end content, but it's a nice way in terms of if you're in a crowd of enemies and you need a way to get out, go in, like finish an enemy, go invis, run away for a little bit, heal up a little bit. It doesn't last that long, but it's quite nice. Now going into our artifact here, we are using, Season of the Deep's relic thing. So picking up an Orb of Power grants your void weapons volatile rounds. This is very, 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 very good. However, its timer is short. Its timer is quite short. That's why it's nice to have 2 ways of getting volatile. And then we have defeating a Void debuff targets grants a Void Breach while you have a Void or Prismatic subclass equipped. Void Breaches give you class ability energy when you pick them up. So something to keep in mind here, Stasis Shards, if you have a Fragment on, gives you melee energy. Tangles don't really give you anything in particular. Shooting them can give you different buffs and whatever. But Stasis Shards give you melee energy with the Fragment. Void Breaches give you class ability energy. Ionic Traces give you all class ability energy, all ability energy. And Fire Sprites, which come from Solar, give you grenade energy. So Void Breaches give you class ability energy. We are using our class ability quite a bit. Now, picking up a Void Breach gives you an Overshield or refreshes an existing Overshield. This essentially helps make your setup, makes this setup pretty much a permanent Overshield. And being a powerful command with a Void Weapon has a chance to generate heavy ammo progress for you and your teammates. That's kind of good, but mainly for your teammates, not necessarily for yourself. Void Grenades disrupt combatants, so our Magnetic Grenade is now Overload. Quite nice. This also means we do not need the fragment that makes our grenade suppress. Now, picking up a Void Breach causes your next source of Void damage to create a large weakening pulse. Keep in mind, Volatile, Weaken, and Suppress all count as debuffs to the enemy. Keep in mind, for some weapon perks like Repulsor Sprays, this used to not work because it would kill the enemy before applying the Volatile, but they fixed it to where it does apply the Volatile first, so you can get Repulsor Sprays and that sort of thing from that type of thing. And finally, you gain temporary bonus to Void Weapon damage after you defeat a target with the Void Weapon, while at least one of your Void abilities is fully charged. This damage bonus increases based on the number of fully charged Void abilities you have. So yeah, is it super duper useful necessarily? No, but keep in mind here, we are not doing any damage with our Void Super or anything like that. Now let's get into the weapons here. Of course, we're able to cover all champion types. Void is probably the weakest subclass in terms of, at least in my personal opinion, Void is the weakest subclass in terms of dealing with a champion, with its own abilities. Because trying to shield charge like, the only ability that we have that natively stuns champions is Shield Bash here. Nothing else really can. Probably the Arsenal weakens, but Weaken doesn't do anything. But, of course, outside of Suppressor Grenade. But keep in mind, Arctine, Flashbang Grenades, there are tons of ways to jolt, right? For overloads. Melee also, and also Flashbang is a really good grenade. Psycho Strike Blinds, all that jazz. However, without having to really get into a ton of fragment stuff, you can't really suppress super easily. And, of course, Volatile Rounds are no longer they no longer stun anti-barrier weapons. So, as you can see here, Void can't do anything else except for stun overloads. And it doesn't even do that super duper well. However, we have solutions here. Now, before we get into the big boy rocket here, let's talk about the kinetic slot here. We are using Defiance of Yasmin with Rewind Rounds and Vorpal Weapon here. This is the only raid anti-barrier sniper. So keep in mind, Succession from Deepstone Crypt is unstoppable, and Supremacy is from Last Wish, and it is Overload. So this is one of the very, very few anti-barrier snipers that are in the kinetic slot. The other one is Thoughtless from Season of the Chosen. It's either from Season of the Chosen or Season of the Risen. I believe it's from Season of the Risen. Now to think about it, it's from Season of the Risen. Thoughtless, it is a stasis kinetic sniper. It doesn't have that great of rolls, but that is a great option in terms of dealing with anti-barrier champions from a distance. The rest of them are from, like, shotguns for the most part, like Heritage, that sort of thing. The shotgun from the Final Shape campaign is anti-barrier as well. That is kind of most of your better anti-barrier weapons are in raids, unfortunately. But if you don't have access to those, just so at least this, like I said, a lot of this is going to be mainly for new players, but you can filter your category by anti-champion. So I did kinetic and barrier, and if we just go to ammo type being special, as you can see, this list is quite short here. Again, from a raid. I don't even know if these shotguns are available because they were all from old seasons. Of course, Someday is the shotgun from the Final Shape campaign that you can grind for and get. Outside of that, I would recommend Arbalest. However, that means we can't use Arla Monarch, which is going to be our energy weapon. This mainly is for our Bushido set, but again, if you need anti-barrier desperately, I would recommend running Arbalest, and you still want to rock a setup, I would recommend running Arbalest, and then run Kindled Orchid, which has Repulsors, Race, Destabilizing Rounds. Any weapon that has that, great. So yeah, we're using Le Monarch here, which is great for overloads. And for our heavy weapon, we are using Folded Root. You can get this from the engrams that is in the tower, that you have to use legendary marks for. Now the role I have is Cluster Bomb, Lasting Impression. I don't have Impact Casing, unfortunately, but I'm just using this. These don't matter too much. This also doesn't really matter that much, but we're using Cluster Bomb, Lasting Impression. This does stack quite well with Gallowhorn. So if you have one Gallowhorn user, this can go quite crazy. We have, of course, Reload Sweet Masterwork. Just reload, reload, reload. Now, we don't have Bait and Switch. The alternative option here is if you have a rocket launcher that has Bait and Switch. To my knowledge, there aren't that many that have it. But here we're going to go into Archetype Rocket. You can also use this with Linear, but I personally prefer Rocket. So my original setup did use Hezen Vengeance with Bait and Switch Cluster Bomb. However, I decided to go all in on Void Weapons because our Void Weapons is what's receiving a boost. So you don't necessarily need to set up Bait and Switch, but Le Monarch is great for setting up Bait and Switch here. So there is that. But your order of operations, if you're using Bait and Switch, you would do Le Monarch, Sniper, then you would of course use your Rocket from there. Lasting Impression, I would not recommend using with Bait and Switch because it just takes a little bit of time to detonate. So that is just something to keep in mind. Now, in terms of armor, we are using the Bushido set. Final blows of freshly drawn or reloaded weapons heal you. So if you want to use your rocket as more of like an ad clear type deal, you can do that as well. Bows, that's why we're using a bow. Shotgun and sword final blows temporarily reduce incoming damage. Damaging targets with those weapons extend the effect. Of course, Le Monarch is a bow, so that's just the main part that we're using here. Now, in terms of stat distribution, grenade, you do need your grenade to do a decent amount of damage. Your super, it does not need to be well above 100, point blank period. You really just need it to be around 70, but again, we are kind of locked here in terms of stats. So melee, I would recommended. Melee is mainly there to keep your overshield up, nothing more. If you are using shield bash, you're going to want this to be higher. But class ability, again, only around 70. Health does not need to be that high. Your weapon stat needs to be as high as you can get it. Your weapon stat needs to be as high as you can get. Most of your damage is all of your damage is coming from your weapons. Now, Helm of Saint 14. Helm of Saint 14. Thus, voiding kinetic stuff. Now, Weapons of Light persist after, Word of Dawn. I'll explain this a little bit later, because Bubble is where things get a little weird. These are my mods, if y'all want to see them. Again, we're using Ashes to Assets, because our grenade should be killing here. That's why we're also using Firepower. Our grenade should be killing. And again, Grenade font to buff our grenade stat even further. So we are using Void Weapon Surge. Because our weapon stat is above 100, we're using Void Weapon Surge. And that's also why we are using Folded Root as well, because we're buffing Le Monarch and Folded Root here, not just one or the other here. Now, Bubble. Bubble is a little strange. First off, Bubble is a little bit weird. You had to step out of it. But, yeah, it's a little bit weird. You can't shoot through it. Which is very strange. But outside of it, as you can see on the left-hand side of my screen, you do have Weapons of Light still. Outside of it. And the Saint is the Bubble's duration. When you get kills with it, you can extend its duration by picking it up, and you can throw it elsewhere. But unfortunately, yeah, you cannot. It's very finicky. I was able to shoot it through it earlier for some reason. I'm not completely sure why. So that power aspect is a little weird. It might have to do with an enemy being inside of it, but the Bubble's range is quite large. So yeah, when you have enemies inside of here, you can shoot through it. So yeah, as you can see, I can no longer shoot through it. But when you have enemies inside of your bubble, you can shoot outside of it, which is very, very strange. Just to demonstrate this again. See, now I can shoot through it perfectly fine. It's interesting, those damage. That's so strange. But yeah, you can shoot outside of the bubble. Again, you can pick it up and throw it and move it. So yeah, that was something that was a little bit interesting that I noticed with bubble. You can shoot through it if there's at least one enemy in the bubble. The second the enemy dies, you can no longer shoot through it. If you are by yourself, you can make great use out of this. However, if you're with a team, you need to take the bubble's range into account. So, because the teammate's going to kill whatever enemy's inside that bubble. Because, you know, of course, you know, why not? So yeah, that is explanations of the build all done and dusted. I do apologize, there's just a lot of stuff with this build and some nuance with this setup. So that's why I kind of had to go through that, specifically with Bubble. So yeah, again, if you can get, we're going to use the Corrupted Strike for old fire team's sake. We are going to have Unstop Overload, so we actually would not need Barrier here. Unfortunately, the buff we are going to have is class ability Healing. Is that going to matter necessarily for us? No. By the way, in terms of damage resist, I would suggest having a Sniper damage resistance, because, yeah, it can be rough. Now, if you are using bait and switch, you are using a bait and switch rocket, I would actually recommend you having a weapon like Mountaintop, or if you have Heritage, a Heritage with Recombination. Recombination is the perk that you are going to want on your kinetic weapon. Because Le Monarque is going to help you build up those stacks, and again, it's more of a blow thy load situation. But again, our purpose is not really to do that necessarily. We are on Grandmaster difficulty, so we are on the second highest difficulty outside of Ultimate, of course. So y'all going to be seeing a little bit more of a higher end stuff. Now, again, for the Lost Sector, I will be doing it on Master difficulty, not Grandmaster difficulty. But, you know, what can you do? Alright, so here we are. We are going to have Scorn overloads here.
We're approaching the temple.
Copy that. Standing by.
Lord Overshields are all over here, so...
We're heading inside now.
Good. Descend to the heart of the temple. You're looking for one of the Queen's Techians. Tech witches, you Guardians call them. Her name is Sadia. She was taken, but she can be saved.
Let that Orb of Power.
She will try to kill you. Much as you might like to do the same,
Woo!
you must spare her.
And Le Monarque does stack very nicely with Bolt Charge.
Clear the room. I'll get it.
Oh my god, of course we have a... You just have a guy that just likes to just run straight through things. This might prevent us from showcasing the build very well, but... Again, our purpose is more of a support type setup.
Heads up.
I do gotta concentrate just a little bit. I'm gonna stick him with that and run away. And as y'all saw there, I didn't need to pass the ball. Oof. Shriekers do shred. Shriekers do shred still. Got another ogre over there, so that's what we're gonna know. Oh, my own rocket killed me. Okay, so I don't know I did forget to mention here. If so rockets can kill you. Only reason why I don't care for a lasting impression necessarily, but again, void rockets as a whole just aren't particularly good. If we're just being real here, void rockets just are not that great. Bubble. Fuck! I tell rockets are a little bit of a struggle. That was just bad spawning on my part. This just decided to be no fucking timer whatsoever. Okay. Yeah, this strike is a little scuffed. Strike is a little scuffed, but that's okay. I won't get teleported back in either. Little guys like to teleport around a little bit. Gotta run away from him. He's just gonna run ahead, so... Yeah, alright, invis lasts for 5 seconds. Woo-wee! You don't have to get a precision hit to do the damage over time. However, getting that precision hit is nice. This is a kind of a high skill kind of build. And here's a high skill ceiling. Also, I will say if you are one that knows some little bit more advanced tech, you can use a sword instead of course, the rocket launcher, and do bubble skating if you know how to. Bubble skating is a little bit finicky, but yes, Titans do have some movement stuff as well. Grenade. I will say, in the past, how this build kind of used to operate is you actually did get your, you would get your bubble back extraordinarily fast, but they nerfed, weapons rate of generating your super, so you still do get it back quickly, but it's not as fast as it used to be. So that's just something to keep in mind here.
There she is.
But generally
Bring her back
speaking,
to the
in
light.
team-based content, if you don't have an Eager Red Sword, you're going to be behind, basically. So we just put Bubble right here. They'll get increased weapon damage for a little bit. Go back in the bubble for a little bit of a safety. More overshield.
Watch yourself.
Alright, this build does take a little bit of concentration from me to get my precision hits. Woo, we're in danger. So we'll go invis for a little bit. Overshield.
We've got her on the run. Keep it up.
Okay, now we just run through. Again, when you're using bubble, position matters a lot. Beautiful. I always wait for... Woo! No! We got flung. That's okay. Hey, the good thing is y'all are seeing the flaws. Oh my, it spawned me all the way back here. Holy. I'm gonna get pulled. I'm just gonna get pulled, then that's okay. If an arena is very small, like this area up here, I actually would not recommend, sometimes it's better to not use your bubble. Instead, just rely on your rally barricade just a little bit more. We'll wait for that. Yeah, we aren't gonna make it there, but... Oh, I got joining allies. Wow. But I'm already almost here. I'm just bubbling. Yeah, I couldn't showcase it that well, but I'm sure y'all got the kind of the gist of how things work here. And of course, loot is not something we necessarily care about here. I did forget to show y'all my fashion. Because I'll give them the green. I will say, when this build works properly... 69 kills, that's funny. I will say, this build can generate a crap ton of orbs. However, is it the greatest at generating orbs? No, because it relies on your bubble spam capabilities. So let me show y'all the fashion real quick, even though it's just super black, but This was an old rock I used to rock. I did use Amethyst Veil, I believe, originally. I used a mixture of Amethyst Veil and Ultra Plasmic, if I remember correctly. But yeah. Old-fashioned. The reference to the whole C14 stuff. Now, time to show y'all the other build. And honestly, this build's going to work a little bit more properly. Alrighty, so we're back here with the new build. Now, keep in mind, this build uses old themes, but the core of the build is new. Now, keep in mind for this upcoming build, this is not as good in a lot of teams nowadays. The average Guardian as a whole is very, very strong in terms of ad clear. So just keep in mind, especially with six fire team activity, things, this build is not as good. This build mainly thrives on you being solo or a higher difficulty where enemies cannot be just nuked. So just keep that in mind with this particular build. This is more so for solo play. But we are using Doomfang Pauldrons. The fashion is old. So I'm going to show y'all the fashion here. The fashion is a little bit on the older side. I forgot. And with this veil. And I'm using one of the chest pieces that's synergized with it. So this is an old fashioned. This is an old fashioned, but just because it's old doesn't mean it's not good. So let's go. We're gonna discuss abilities first, then weapons, then armor. Y'all know the drill here. We are gonna go a little bit quicker through this because a lot of the fragments and stuff are the same. So we're using Sentinel Shield. Everything else is Shield Throw is a requirement. Do not use Shield Bash with this build. Use Shield Throw. You need to use Shield Throw. Of course, we're using Magnetic Grenade. You kind of need to use Magnetic Grenade. However, Vortex is a decent alternative option. However, you are going to have to swap out one of these fragments. You will not have access to 5. Now, the build we are using is Controlled Demolition and Offensive Bulwark. Now, you might be like, why are you using Offensive Bulwark without Bastion? We'll get into that. But Controlled Demolition, hitting a target with a Void ability or a Volatile Explosion makes them volatile. So keep in mind, Shield Throw and Grenades are going to make enemies volatile by default. Furthering damage to a volatile target causes them to explode. The key part of this, though, is grants you and nearby allies health when volatile targets explode near you. That's the part. Because this will mean a Sentinel Shield will volatile targets upon hits, that sort of thing. Overshield is not as strong for supers like Sentinel Shield, where they last for quite a long time, longer than your Overshield's going to last. Now, for Offensive Bulwark, while you have an Overshield or Inside Ward of Dawn, keep in mind we don't have access to this. At least that's what you would think. Final blows grant grenade energy and melee energy, yada yada. The usual. You gain an additional shield throw while on Sentinel Shield. This is necessary. It just is necessary for Sentinel Shield. You have to have that second shield throw active. Now for fragments, of course, we're using the usual dilation for the extra weapon super. We're using melee final blow start health regeneration for you and nearby allies. This is to kind of help emergency survivability. However, if you prefer more close range encounters, I would suggest using Echo of Reprisal. Final blows when surrounded by combatants grant super energy. Outside of that, of course, we're using this to get our weapons volatile. And Void Ability Final Blows causes targets to explode. We're not just using that because, Void Ability shenanigans, but for the extra plus 10 super. Because, stat-wise, your top 2 stats need to be your weapons, your super, and then your melee. Unfortunately, a lot of our armor has high weapon. I would recommend, you should probably have your weapon stats somewhere in between 90 and 100. You do not need to go above 100 for the weapon stat. However, your super needs to be your highest stat. So just keep that in mind here. But in terms of weapons, we cannot deal with overloads with this setup. Because unfortunately, this is barrier. However, you do have suppression. So if you do want to lean more into the ability side of things, either change your artifact and the artifact we are using, or just use a suppressor grenade. But don't rely on getting kills with it. Now, before I get properly into the weapons, let's get into the Tablet of Ruin, which is the artifact we are using here. Now, we are using Rapid Final Blows, the kinetic weapon, or Void Weapon Magic. Basically, this helps us spawn Void Breaches. Is it that useful for us because we're not using our class ability? No. It's not really that useful at all. But Rapid Void Weapon Precision hits, where we will be doing with Commemoration, and Rapid Void Weapon Final Blows grants volatile rounds. Volatile detonations grant class ability energy. That class ability energy is useless, but the rest of that is extremely good. Now, we are using an LMG. While surrounded, machine guns and glaives gain increased reload speed and stability. Final blows heal you. I would recommend if you want to use your machine gun as an ad-clear weapon, I don't recommend the role that we are using for this purpose. I would recommend using Repulsor Spray, Stabilize Res, or something like that. Now, we are also picking up special ammo has a chance to grant heavy ammo. This is why heavy ammo is not an issue with our particular build, is because of this specifically. And then rapidly applying Volatile causes your next instance of Void damage to create a weakening burst. Applying Weaken provides a small Void overshield, which buffs Commemoration further. So again, Commemoration is our bossing weapon here, which is not something normally you can do per se. Casting a super while you are critically wounded or have an elemental buff matching your super element grants a period of increased super damage. Not super duper. It helps the initial cast of the super, but outside of that, again, Void Overshield is not something we can get access to. And then defeating weakened targets with a Void weapon applies Volatile to nearby targets. Powerful targets increase the radius of the explosion. I will say, if you don't want to use an LMG as your heavy, you can use Particle Deconstruction instead of Limit Break. Sorry, Particle Reconstruction. You can use that instead of Limit Break. But also, this is not going to be as useful for you, and there's really nothing else in this slot here. Again, it would change the setup a little bit too much for my liking. Now, we're using Mountaintop here because we're going to be able to get a lot of kills for this, so recombination is quite easy to get up. Also, you can only increase the weapons and enhancement level. You cannot tier this weapon, so just keep that in mind here. And because we're using a light subclass, getting kills with this thing is going to give us grenade energy, which is quite nice. But again, this is more of a one-shot for champions specifically. Now, Commemoration, we're using Reconstruction Focus Fury. Now, keep in mind, if you're using this LMG as more of an active weapon, you're going to want a different role. I would also suggest, making, especially this origin trait, enhanced. So, just to give yourself just a little bit of extra ability energy with getting kills with this. This does have some great rolls on it. Commemoration is, in my opinion, the best Void LMG in the game. My personal favorite Void LMG, as y'all can tell. So, there is that for y'all. Now, the main show of this build is Turncoat. Turncoat is the new Void hand cannon that just released. It is honestly very good. Honestly, if you're a Warlock, this thing is insane. But Titans, we can make use of this thing as well. Now, rapid hits charge your next shot into an explosive round that deals additional damage. This thing is more of a passive thing that's nice. Now, the latent power, this thing is natively anti-barrier. Same with Commemoration, so just keep that in mind. You're relying on your second champ ability to be your kinetic slot. Dealing damage builds latent power. Precision hits and final blows deal more. Don't rely as much on getting precision hits. Precision hits is nice, but you don't need to. But yeah, when you hold the trigger, it buffs the hand cannon. After a certain point in time, you'll get overwhelming power that will slowly tick down your health. Devour will override it pretty much. And it won't kill you. Overwhelming power won't kill you necessarily. But it does get you so low that, yeah, an enemy's going to snipe you from somewhere. It's not super difficult to not have to deal with it. For example, if you have Bastion or something like that, or if you want to use it on my other bubble setup, you can Overshield will help with this as well. It lasts for 9 seconds, I believe. Now, the Catalyst. Catalyst is the important part. When empowerment ends, you gain a Void Overshield. The strength of it depends on how long you're empowered. So that means after the empowered is ended, so when Turncoat's not as strong, your grenades and melees is going to get buffed because you will now have an Overshield. So we are able to get Overshield with this setup and everything. Now, in terms of the armor set bonus, we are using Thriving Survivor. This comes from Renegades. I did try for a lot of these more later on builds, I tried not to rely as much on raid armor specifically, but there's going to be a few times where we kind of have to. But this for Thriving Survivor, Final blows with grenades grant heat weapons bonus stability and event speed. That part's useless. Grants primary ammo weapons bonus stability and reload speed. That's the important part. So our grenades are not only going to give our hand cannon volatile, but also going to increase the stability and reload speed. The 4-piece set, multiple final blows with heat weapons or primary ammo weapons grant bonuses to weapon and grenade stats and have increased ammo generation for heat weapons and primary weapons. So that main part in bonus to weapon and grenade stat, that's why your weapon stat doesn't need to be that high. And our grenade stat is, both grenade and melee are pretty important here. Melee is just slightly more important because of Doomfang Pauldrons. So Doomfang Pauldrons is going to give us a version of Weapon Surge. So just keep that in mind. And defeating targets with Void melee grants super energy. But this is our setup here. Again, we have the fonts here because these are our main two buff things. So there y'all can kind of see recuperation is not necessary. Just kind of nice to have. So on that note though, we're going to do a Lost Sector on Master difficulty here. Alright, so just to show y'all here, before we go in here properly, we are doing Skywatch. It only has Anti-Barrier Champion, which is perfect for us. But we are using Equipment Locked, no buffs whatsoever. And of course, we're using Shock and Cascade, Chill Touch, and Counterfeit. Those are the usual ones that I usually use. So if promotion's available, then I'll use it. I kind of wish promotion was available permanently, but you know, that sort of thing. We are on Master difficulty. Again, this is the lowest you can get for like S tier gear. You get S tier gear for Master difficulty, just get your like 5 tier gear. Master difficulty, you know, just doing, you know, those sorts of things. But yeah, so keep in mind here, the last two are going to be Stasis and Strand. Stasis is going to be on Thursday, and Strand will be on Saturday. Just keep that in mind.
The Guardian has heavy weapons and plenty of grenades.
Also, compared to some other like Caldera, for instance, enemies aren't as grouped together. Also, don't mind my shots. I have not used this build in quite some time. I've been using Arc quite a bit. See, we already have Overload. We have Lane Power, but we're not going to use it yet. Give ourselves a nice little reload here. But yeah, if you don't really care for the particular artifact that I am personally using, you can go ahead and just use the other artifact I was using. The volatile rounds there, they're healing us, so we can actually keep the same duration on. Ah! And it does auto reload for you. Bam! And the Void Overshield lasts for the same amount of time that you had it active. So if you only had Overwhelming Power active for 4 seconds, your Overshield would last for 4 seconds. And also we already have max combination, which is nice. But if you had it active for the full 9 seconds, your Overshield's going to last for the full 9 seconds. Here we'll use our super here. Shield Throw did get the tracking buff massively, so throw it down there. And of course, the duration of our thing is extended based on kills. If you're using the setup in Onslaught, I would recommend having Power Preservation on in your helmet instead of the extra super stat. Give ourselves a little bit of a thing there. Again, the more volatile explosions, the better. As you can see, well, even on like Master, where you don't have difficulties, this is kind of the closest Titans can get to having Devour. Without, you know, actively building into Devour. Titans as a whole are a little bit more punished for trying to go into Devour, most of their Guardian classes, because we have to rely solely on fragments. And a lot of the Void fragments give you negatives, so that's something to consider here. But to be fair, this also means we don't need to, doesn't necessarily require us to do much for this anyways. Like, just get rapid kills, volatile will come your way. The range out of volatile needs to happen is quite large, so for the healing to take effect. Bam, got this active again. I shouldn't have activated right then and there. And again, I would recommend hip firing this thing, but as you can kind of see, our health just keeps going back up. This cannon is very strong. I really do like this setup. Power. Yeah, we will always have one ability. I missed. We'll go ahead and use the Sentinel Shield one last time. Void buffs is just not going to happen with this build. It's just not going to happen for the most part without a proper setup. You can wait till you're critically wounded to do the buff. Well, to cast Sentinel Shield. Again, we can just fire at him from a distance. Bada bing, bada boom. Keep in mind, this does take a little bit of time to ramp up in power, so that's something to keep in mind as well. It does have target lock, I believe, so you can use target lock if you so choose.
But that's what we signed up for. If people like the Guardian don't step up, those fires burn the whole system down.
But that is it for all of the light subclasses. We're, wrapped it up with Void. Now, I do want to mention here in terms of, well, one, which builds are my personal favorites from each one. For Arc, I thought it was going to be Necrochasm, but I'm going to be real here. I love Anarchy and Palindrome. This is definitely my favorite Arc build. This is the build that I have been rocking in teams for the most part, because for the most part, doing Ackler is kind of useless. For Solar, it's definitely Khepri's Horn. It's definitely Khepri's Horn in 1K. Khepri's Horn, 1K, great. However, that's probably not my number 2 build in general so far. It's definitely this one that y'all just saw. That's my number 2. Below Anarchy's build, then it goes this, then it goes Khepri's Horn. It's just, I really do like this hand cannon. I'm glad Bungie, still gave us it. But we have 2 builds left. Stasis, and then Strand last. Like I said, we'll be doing solo Lost Sectors for, for Stasis, we're going to be doing an Empire Hunt for Stasis. For Strand, we will be doing Lost Sector. We'll be finishing out with probably 2 Lost Sectors. Because Typhon Typhon Imperator is one of the solo Lost Sectors, so we will be running that for Strand. And also, the flow of a Lost Sector is very important, and Typhon Imperator has a good flow for showcasing strand builds. Empire hunts are great for stasis because the enemies are grounded for the most part. So we will be doing 2 Empire hunts for stasis. Do keep in mind, I will likely not be doing those in Master difficulty due to I would have to do them solo to really be able to showcase all of the builds. Because again, most of these builds you're going to be using solo. I guess it took us a little bit to matchmake into a matchmade strike, so that's something to keep in mind here. But anyways, on that note though, thanks for tuning in. Go check out the playlist on the playlist tab of this channel if you want to go watch the Arc and Solar setups. The Arc one's not as long because one of them is a raid setup, so I didn't even go into an activity for it. And then the other one was Solar. Do expect Stasis and Strand to be a little bit just as long. Keep in mind, it's going to take a little bit of time for dungeons to be active and the raid video to come out. So just bear with me because those are good. They take a lot more work than the rest of these. So on that note, though, I do appreciate y'all for tuning in, and I'm gonna catch y'all on the flip side.